It's 4:30. We'll call our special called meeting to order. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance and followed by our invocation by Councilman Frank Stevenson. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Lord, we just come humbly before you to ask for your discernment, your wisdom, your grace, Lord, as we consider the affairs of this community, Lord, which we serve. And we just trust in your faithful provision, Lord, your striving to overcome our weakness and shortcomings to accomplish, Lord, the good for this people that you seek for us to pursue. And we just trust in you, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Kim, can we have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Misty Cavanaugh. Here. Tony Space.
Here.
Adam Townsend.
Here.
Larry Knopfinger.
Here.
Frank Stevenson.
Here.
Chad Mincer.
Here.
Mayor, we do have a quorum.
All right, well, first order of business is the approval of minutes from our May 1st meeting.
The special called meeting of the City Council was held on May the 1st, 2023 at 8 a.m. in the Mayor's Conference Room. It was called to order by Mayor Kevin Cotton, with the Mayor and all City Council members were present for the meeting. It was to discuss the budget meetings with city department superintendents for fiscal year 2023-2024. We also had a discussion of public agency funding request, and there was a motion to not approve the funding for the 2023-2024 fiscal year for the public transportation request from PACS due to the amount of money that is required to operate the buses and only a few riders that are using this system. It was made a motion by Mr. Frank Stevenson, and it was seconded by Tony Space. We had Tony Space, Larry Knopfinger, Frank Stevenson, Chad Mincer had voted yes, not to approve the funding, and 2 noes were Adam Townsend and Misty Cavanaugh. And then we had a motion to adjourn.
Are there any corrections to the minutes from May 1st? If not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, we have the minutes from our May 15th meeting.
The May the 15th City Council meeting was held in the City Council chambers. It was held at 4:30 p.m. It was called to order by Mayor Kevin Cotton. We had roll call, which we had the mayor and all city council members were present for the meeting. We had approval of the minutes of the regular called meeting of May the 1st, 2023. We had approval of bills and payroll. We had a guest speaker that was Lauren Williams with Congressman James Comer's office. We had a fire department report and a police department report. We had several council committee reports from Tourism Advisory Board that were approvals. And then one of those was the electric pedestal. This was for the Tourism Advisory Board for near the Serenity Path. We had approval of 2 fountains at the lake at the Mattisville City Park and approval up to $100,000 to pave the walking trail at Mattisville City Park. We had a presentation of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 mayor's budget message to the legislative body. We had first reading of an ordinance adopting the budget. We also had a resolution to accept bids for the mowing service, a resolution to accept bids for the mowing service at Oddfellows Cemetery, resolution to accept bid for airfield electrical rehabilitation, a resolution to declare vehicles from Public Works as surplus property, a resolution to declare Lot 1 at 140 South Spring Street as surplus property, a resolution to declare equipment at Water Department as surplus property, a resolution to declare lot at 212 Madison Square as surplus property. And then there was an item for discussion where we had tabled the road closure, and then we had a proclamation and an adjournment.
Are there any corrections to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, we'll get into our guest speakers. We will have a 3-minute time limit on all of those that are requesting to speak. There's a sign-in sheet. Ms. Jennifer Daves has that. She will call your name, If you'll come up to the podium and if you'll give us your name before you start, and then they will start the timer to give you 3 minutes to speak.
First speaker is Tony Smith.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Tony Smith. I'm a lifelong resident of Madisonville. For those of you who don't know me, a brief history. I was in the second class of what was known as the Leadership Greater Madisonville program. Over the last 35 years, I've invested in Madisonville and various businesses and been involved in city advocacy projects from legal alcohol sales, the new city growth plans, to what was Taste of Madisonville, to Picnic in the Park, where I rode my Harley Davidson up on the stage. I was sure I'd drop it. I have long been a proponent of my town and its people. With that said, when I read online about the ending of the bus service, Go Madisonville, it caused me to be concerned. So I rode one of the routes one time to get a feel for it and the people who use it. I asked the folks that boarded the bus a few questions about themselves and what the service meant to them. I met a clean-cut young man, Brandon. He rides the bus to get to work. He has no car, and without the service, it was a 40-minute walk for him. I met Michelle, who uses the bus to pay her rent, doctor's appointments, and grocery shopping. She has to take both the blue and green lines. I met Brenda, who uses the bus, doctor's appointments, to pay her rent. She has a cane to get around. I met Anthony, a man who also uses the bus to get to work. He has no car. His only way to get to a grocery and pay bills is the bus. I met Kelly, an everyday rider, and she transfers from the blue route to the green route to meet her needs. She has no car. I met Judy, again, no car. She has to take her laundry to a place that she can wash her clothes, grocery shopping, etc. I met Regina, who uses it to get to her two jobs, the Baymount Inn and the Ideal Market. Madisonville has transportation to students in the community college system. Many of the riders have disabilities and they cannot drive. The riders are about 80% women. For women in the Carious Addiction Program, they're required to not have a car, yet are required to work. So
Cynthia Carr.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Carr. Thank y'all for having me to speak. I'm here to let y'all know I was the very first, me and my sister, Ike and Tina Cobb, we was the very first one to ride y'all's bus system in 2017. The mayor at the time was on the bus with us. The guy that had it started, he was on the bus with us. And they let us, at the time, you was not allowed to ride both of the buses and within an hour. Well, they let us to do it. We was the very first ones on it. Well, during the year, she got sick. And then PAX had to help us. And then at the beginning, I found out I was on, I guess y'all's website for the transit. At the beginning, I had people coming to me. I work at Big Lots. I'm a cashier, #1 cashier. They was coming to me and asking questions for me. How do you get on the bus? How much does the bus? And the transportation. Well, I told them. And then, like you said, I heard that they said that when the COVID hit, the buses wasn't that many riders. It was a couple of times I had to call work and tell them, hey, the buses was full. I had to wait until the next bus comes around. And I'm just an hour, maybe 20, not even 20 minutes away from work. They have PAX come and pick me up, no problem. Y'all want us to ride the PAX. Well, that's about $150 a month that we can't afford. So I am willing and hoping that y'all will keep the buses running. For I am disabled, so I depend on the bus. And it takes me back and forth to work. Doctor appointments, sometimes I have to do both buses. But I'm willing to do the two buses because I can't afford, I'm a working lady, and I still can't afford the PAX and our new tax. What is it called? The clown tax? Can't afford that. That's $25 a day, and I work maybe 5 hours at Big Lots. That'd be covering my paycheck to pay to get there. So I'm willing to do anything we can to keep the bus going. I don't care if it's down to one bus, where we pay $50 a month for a pass and still 25, and still waiting on packs. Sometimes one of the bus here and some of the riders has got to wait almost 30 to 45 minutes to be picked up when we are riding the bus. And some of them are dialysis patients. My sister was one, and she had to wait almost an hour for them to come back to pick her up for the packs. So y'all wanting us to pay for a taxi and packs when we can barely afford to live besides working and paying $150 a month to try to find a way back and forth to work. Thank you. That's all I can do, guys. I'm getting emotional, but thank you, and I'm hoping y'all will keep us going or try to figure out some way that it won't cost us $150 a month to get back and forth to the doctors, the grocery stores, or to work. And thank you.
Kim Jackson.
Mayor Cotton, my name is Kim Jackson. I'm a regular rider of Madisonville Go Transit. 30 years ago, after I graduated from high school, I didn't get to drive a car because my mom and sister were so busy with work, and I was on disability. So I decided to move out of Grapevine and into one of those apartments on Princeton Pike. So I had to rely on the people at church as well as my mother to take me somewhere like the grocery store and the mall and everything until 2017. 6 years ago, Madisonville Transit had finally changed my life when it comes to getting around town, so I could go grocery shopping and go to mall and go the places I like. And then I got a chance to go to Madisonville Community College, which I started in the fall of 2019, and I finally graduated in the fall of 2021. And I'm now finishing up my third semester at Murray State University Regional Campus. I got one more year left. The reason why I hope that you keep the bus, because I'm dependent on it along with any of the people who are low income like myself. And I think that people deserve a right, no matter if they're disabled or not. They dependent on public transportation. And if you even if you take the public transportation services out, we're all going to be left behind, and there's nowhere to go. And just like Cynthia Carr says, it's going to be expensive for her to drive to and go on the PAX van to and from work. It's expensive, and she can't afford that. And there's a lot of other people who don't have cars and vehicles. They got a hard time driving to and from work. I think it'd be a lot easier for all of us to help each other, for the people who are unfortunate, like the people myself who are low income and it doesn't have a vehicle, and without it we all be left behind and no one to talk to. So I suggest Mayor Cotton to think of this in consideration about our transportation services that we definitely need. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael Howard.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I run the Arch Community Health Coalition, which works throughout Hopkins County and surrounding counties on various different issues that we face. Transportation has always been sort of core to all of those things. It's one of those things that's very fundamental to everything else that you try to do. If you want to do something about healthcare, transportation is part of healthcare. If you want to do something about nutrition, transportation is part of nutrition, and so on and so forth. So transportation has always been part of what we do, but it became sort of more front and center when Blue Dot shut down back in February, and I got much more directly involved and started working more directly on transportation issues region-wide, and started gathering a lot of information, doing surveys and that sort of things from both providers who depend on transportation to bring people in, for their services and people who need to get there to take advantage of the services. When this came down, this was just another challenge in the overall transportation scheme. And so we've been working, as I said, on possible augmentation of our transportation network. We've always had gaps. There are things that PAX does everything PAX can do. I can't say anything except good things about PAX, and I'm sure everybody involved in this is working from a point of good. But we've got gaps. Then Blue Dot shut down. Our gaps became really big holes, and this is putting a bigger hole in that as well. What I would ask of the council is that you come to some conclusion that will allow us to continue public transport in Madisonville until we can figure out if perhaps there's something else we can do, something we can do to make it more affordable. But if we lose public transportation, the downstream costs are going to be far more than the costs of providing the transportation in the first place. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Alan Davis.
I'm Alan Davis. I think most of you know me, but if you don't, I've been in Hopkins County for over 40 years and been involved in real estate most of that time. And one of the things we face all the time, I do a lot of commercial and investment properties, and one of the things we face all the time is population and a loss of population. I don't know how many people are familiar with the University of Louisville's population study they did in 2022. What they're projecting is Hopkins County is going to lose 18% of its population by the year 2050. And this thing has come up several times when we talk to people that are looking at opening stores, restaurants, things like that. Well, what's your population doing? Well, it went down from 2010 to 2020. But this report by the University of Louisville has really hit us. And the school board just used that to close Arlington. They said, well, you know, we don't have the children we had before. And the population study from the University of Louisville says we're going to lose a lot more. So this is coming up more times than you. The study is out there. I mean, it's not by some fly-by-night. It's by the University of Louisville. And I look at this. If we lose bus transportation, what about an elderly couple that depend on the bus to go to doctor's appointments, to do things like that? If they can't live independently anymore, they're going to have to move away with family or somewhere where their needs can be met. Or what about the young people that don't have transportation for whatever reason? They're not going to be able to stay in Hopkins County, and that's just going to reinforce what the University of Louisville is saying. This is a really serious issue, in my opinion, because anything we can do to prevent the loss of population, we need to do it. Because I don't want to look, I probably won't be around in 2050, but if you think about it, if 18,000 people in Hopkins County gone, that's what they're projecting. And I think if we stop bus transportation, we're just pushing that a little further. So I very much hope that you can find a way to fund this. Thank you.
Sir.
Brennan Parrish.
Hello. Thank you all for allowing me to get up here and speak. For you, some of you all that don't know who I am, my name is Brennan Parrish. I'm currently a social worker here at our hospital. Got word about this meeting today, and so I figured I'd at least get up here and share my personal experience thus far since I've worked at the hospital. I oftentimes come in contact with a lot of patients throughout my day, and a lot of times it comes down to how do we get you back home? And most of them do have transportation home, whether it be a family member, friend, whatever it may be. But then there are often times that I do have other people that come in and say, I don't know how I'm getting home. And so we assist them in transporting via PACS. We try to set them up with cabs or anything like that. Then we ask them about, how are we going to pay for this? And well, I can't afford that, I often get. And so we have to figure that part out. So to understand that we have a lot of patients that come in that tell me that they do ride our public transportation bus, and to see how affordable it is, and to think that we might take that away from them. I know we're all trying to get back to some normalcy after COVID, but to take this away at this time whenever we're considered to be out of this pandemic now, and basically be taking away some of their basic needs. We've heard that people take this to get to work, people take this to make it to medical appointments, people take it all throughout. So I understand that at one point in time, if it wasn't getting as many people, we're all trying to get back on this daily basis of routine for us again, So I would hate to see this taken away from us. I understand, I don't know what the alternative solution would be for our community, but I do hope that we would be able to find a way to keep it affordable for people. And I will say this, whenever I went into social work and I finally graduated and made it back to Madisonville, I was looking at all the resources that we did have in our community, and I remember seeing the public transportation bus, and I just sat there and smiled because I couldn't believe that our small town would have such a thing. And so to think that it could be taken away, and hearing the stories of other people that do actually ride the bus, it kind of hurts my heart a little bit to know that we're just hurting more people than what I feel like we'd be doing good for if we was to take it away and put the money somewhere else. So thank you all for letting me speak, and I hope we can figure this out together, guys. All right. Thank you all.
Cheryl Red.
My name is Cheryl Red. I live in Cross Creek Apartments. I've been riding the bus since it started, probably within the first week. I only missed a few months when I moved to Princeton with my grandson and then moved back. And recently, because of my knee surgery, I wasn't able to ride the bus. Now, you're talking about PACS transportation. I've spoken to them, and their exact words to me was, yes, they will take us to stores and stuff, but only if they have enough drivers and enough buses. And they're going to have 48-hour notice. Now, that's what they told me. And I talked to Vicki, that's over it all, and that's what she told me. Clown Transport, Clown Taxi, from Cross Creek to Kroger's, $25. That's way over, and back. It's way over than I can afford. Now, I ride the bus when I can now, and when I get my knee back in order, I will be riding it every day. We need this bus. I know 10 or 15 people out at Cross Creek that use walkers, and they have to use the lift to get on the bus. They don't have family that can take them anywhere. And, to take it away and leave them in the lurch is not right. I was extremely happy when I saw that we were going to have a bus, and I don't understand why it's got to be taken away. And the other thing I don't understand is if you voted to do this on May 1st, why did we not hear about it until June 1st? That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Harold Monroe.
Harold Monroe. I'm the executive director at PACS, and I appreciate everyone's comments to date. I thought I'd give y'all a little bit of background on how this decision was made to terminate this. First, I'd like to thank the city as well as PACS for 7-8 years ago actually thinking about trying to start a bus system here. At the time, we had no idea what kind of ridership we would have, but it was a commitment that the city made as well as PACS to commit resources to try that. The first year we were in operation, we had a little over 24,000 passengers. Being the first year, we were relatively pleased with that. We really have never had that ridership at that level since. And the last 2 years, we've barely averaged over 11,000. We run 26 hours a day. Two buses run 26 hours a day. When we first started providing this service, it was $7.42 a rider is what the actual cost was. We're at about $24 a rider now because of the increase in the cost. Other issues that we are facing, quite honestly, the 5311 grant that funded public transportation, we have not received that grant in 3 years. So we've been having to fund this through excesses, if you will, that we had built up that, quite honestly, we don't have anymore. The other issue that came about with the budget on the operating of this service, that doesn't include the purchases of the vehicles. Those were purchased with grants. And I don't know, you may or may not remember, but about 3 years ago or so, the state did away with the toll credits, the gas toll credits. I don't know if y'all familiar with those, but that was what funded the grant that allowed us to purchase these vehicles. These vehicles run about $100,000 a piece. The two we have right now are pushing 300+ thousand miles. They are literally transmission or engine away from being parked. The other challenge we have had is, even going back to the 2019 grant year, we typically buy somewhere between 30 and 40 vehicles a year, give or take. And we are still waiting to receive vehicles that were purchased from 4 grant years away because of the supply chain inventory. And when you look at the current numbers of ridership, and we understand that the people that use this, rely on it and all that, but we have to look at, from FACTS's transportation standpoint, we have to look at our totality of what we do with public transportation. And when you look at the amount of money that we have allocated to the city transit as a percent of the total budget, we've got about 40% of the total funds from that grant being in Hopkins County, Madisonville. And when you look at the 9 counties of the Penny Royal, which our contract from the Department of Transportation requires us to provide public transportation to all 9 counties, we've got to do a little bit better job of allocating appropriately the various funds for that. But if you look at the ridership today, and quite honestly, if we had imagined 7 years ago that the ridership estimates would not improve or increase to any number from 7 years ago, it would not have been something that we would have even entertained at that time. We also, when we started this back in 2017, had some excess funding from another grant that, honestly, 2 years later, we got reduced $1.8 million. So these decisions aren't made in isolations. They're not made on a whim. We've met and talked with this for the last couple of 3 years. And we had when the decision was made not to pursue this, you mean stop?
I think we've met our time, so thank you, sir. Are there any additional names on the list? All right, so at this time, we'll move on to council committee reports. We appreciate everybody coming. We appreciate all your comments. Harold, we appreciate you coming on behalf of PAX. Our next order of business is council committee reports. We have a report from the EDC Committee Chairman, Frank Stevenson.
Yes, Mayor, in December of 2022, the City Council authorized up to $2 million to be paid in 6 equal installments to the Hopkins County Development Corporation for an incentive package for economic development purposes. I would like to hereby move to amend the previous funding authorization and to authorize the payment by the city of up to $2 million to the Madisonville Hopkins County Economic Development Corporation rather than the Hopkins County Development Corporation as an incentive package as originally envisioned for economic development purposes. And I further move that the prior authorization, which provided for payments in 6 equal installments, be amended to authorize $1 million to be paid upon the breaking of ground and the commencement of the construction of the extension of the Hudson Park Drive area, with the final incentive payment of in the amount of $1 million to be paid upon completion of the project and issuance of a certificate of occupancy. This is a change of the recipient of these allocation of funds from the one entity to the currently operative Madisonville Hopkins County Economic Development Corporation, as the Hopkins County Development Corporation is not really functioning in that kind of a role comfortably. So
we have a motion. Do we have a second? Have a motion and a second. Any questions?
It's coming from a recommendation from the EDC committee?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know they were meeting.
Frank is on the Economic Development Board. So,
This came from the Madisonville Economic Development Corporation Board.
But it didn't come from City Council's EDC committee as a recommendation.
Well, I represent that standing on the EDC board as representative of the council in that committee. So,
the change is who is going to be paying that out.
is there a question though about this really doesn't change the material consideration that led to the original authorization. It's just a change of the entity who would do it, because the entity that originally was advised said, we're really not doing that kind of thing anymore.
Because originally it was going to Hopkins County Development Corporation, and they said no, because that wasn't kind of an area of focus, since this is
But
more
they're
retail.
not functioning in that kind of role now, as we understood it, which we didn't understand at the time.
Madisonville Hopkins County Economic Development Corporation has already met as a board, as a whole board, and agreed to be
the recipient of this
funds for
this purpose.
So EDC is going to start doing retail?
EDC has agreed to take care of this incentive, yes.
This is the primary investment here is being made to infrastructure to support development, which will extend beyond this development to other needs in that area of the community.
You all have already approved the incentive. This is just the manner of how it's going to be shifted from the Hopkins County Development Corporation to the Madisonville Hopkins County Economic Development.
I just figured it would come from a recommendation from the City Council's Economic Development Committee, but
Well, that's kind of what we're doing right now.
but they've never met.
No, I think as chairman, at least I can speak intelligently for the intentions of that committee, but the whole council is the one ultimately has to act and make a disposition. So that's what we're putting forth here today.
Additional questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, do we have a committee report from the Annexation and Zoning Committee?
Not at this time, no.
Next, we have old business, second reading of the ordinance adopting the annual budget for fiscal year July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024.
Be it ordained by the City of Madisonville, Kentucky as follows, whereas an annual budget proposal and message has been prepared and delivered to the City Council, and whereas the City Council has reviewed such budget proposal and made necessary modifications, now therefore be it ordained by the City of Madisonville, Section 1, the annual budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023, and ending June the 30th, 2024 is hereby adopted as follows. See Exhibit A, attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference, and also on Section 2 pursuant to Chapter 3406 of the City of Madisonville Code of Ordinance, the classification and compensation plan is adopted as follows, and that is attached as Exhibit B. But the Exhibit A is attached, and I think you all have a copy of the budget there too.
Do I have a motion to approve the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2023 to June 30, 2024?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the budget with the addition of the funding for the 2023-2022 fiscal year for the public transportation request for PACS to operate the city buses.
Sorry, can you approve budget with the amendment?
With the addition of the funding for the 2023-2024 fiscal year for the public transportation request from PACS to fund the city buses.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second that as a allocation, because I guess we need to, I know PACS kind of severed that relationship with us before, but I guess we need to see if there's a relationship that we can continue forward there, and I don't know what that looks like, so.
So we have a motion and a second. We're going to do a call for question and discussion. So Harold, if you don't mind to come back to the podium on that. That would be an amendment to the current budget that's being presented, and will have to be, you're gonna have to find where those allocations are gonna come from, but we're gonna let PAX address that.
We have, based on our earlier conversations and mutual decision with the city, have made other plans for those resources to address what we perceive as public transportation needs in the Pennyroyal, including Hopkins County, Madisonville. So we would not be interested in pursuing that relationship. Again, based on the ridership, this is not a service that we would even consider with any other community based on those numbers. And so we would not be entertaining continuing the Go Madisonville, because we've reallocated those resources. We've already submitted our budgets to the state based on those decisions, and it's not something I think we would be willing to consider at this time.
By my comment, that with PAD's funding and the city's funding, we're looking at almost a $250,000, and PAD's saying they're going away from that, so that would be on our watch to keep this thing going. Although we have other questions about staff and vehicles that we're not in control of, and then there's the reality that brought us to this unfortunate and unenviable position of the ridership, which not to dismiss the stories we've heard here, the accounts of how it's been so helpful to some people, but the detail, the reality is that we're looking at an average of about 42 to 45 people per day at this point, and that cost per rider of around $25 is just unsustainable. We can't justify it. Combined with the reality, as Mr. Monroe has spoken of, is we're looking at not even being able to get vehicles that are now 6 years old and are just a serious mechanical failure away from being inoperable, and we can't get vehicles. It's just beyond our capacity to make this thing happen any longer. If it's so important, why did the ridership fall to such a low level? It's just, we can't explain that, especially in light of, since the first of the year, you would have expected ridership to increase with the closing down of Blue Dot taxi service in the community, but it didn't change it.
So my question would be, had you not been notified by the city in the beginning of May that they would not be funding, would it have been the decision of PAX to cancel it within? Let's say if we had voted to approve the funding, would PAX still be offering the service for the next?
We have been in conversation with the city the last couple of years or so about this is not sustainable. It does not make sense to continue this service.
Okay, so the reason why I asked that is us as a group, Mayor, Council, we made a decision earlier this year to not have outside agency funding meeting because there wasn't going to be no major change at all. And that if there was going to be a change, that we would have a meeting and we can meet with that group. And to me, I would consider this a major change that we never, as a council, had the full opportunity to meet with you. Now, Chairman Stevenson did, met with them, but we were not invited, we were not included in that meeting, and I'm not saying what he said, there's anything that's not true about that, but when it comes to making a decision, I believe the more informed you are, the better decision you can make. And so instead of having one person that come to the council and said, this is what's going on, I would have liked to have seen us as an entire council have these questions, because being able to ask questions now, I'm going to think of the next night another question to ask. And one thing about having those meetings, and that we said if we were going to, if there was going to be a major change, that we would have those meetings in person, and we never did.
I'm confused. We just voted on the minutes of the meeting from May 1st, which included an action by the council regarding this very question. And then, the information that Mr. Monroe shared and other information was discussed at that meeting, and that's where that motion was made and was passed. Now, I realize you and Council Member Kavanaugh voted against that, but there was discussion of that.
He did not have the opportunity to discuss with PAX.
I would like to remind Councilman Townsend that you did have that opportunity. We did send that information out to each of you all to ask if you all wanted to meet with any of those specifically. And if you remember, Councilman Townsend, when you came into my office to talk about this very issue before the May 1st meeting, I explained to you all of the information that was relayed to me from both the administrator and Councilman Stevenson, and advised you to contact both of those individuals and to reach out to Harold Monroe if you had any additional questions. So I do feel like that you did have that opportunity. And then the May 1st meeting was the open discussion that we had in the budget meetings for you to ask additional questions that weren't answered in the time frame from when you were in my office to the May 1st meeting.
I was told about talking to Frank and that they were there, but I was never given I was not told that there was an opportunity to speak. As said, as we should have as a council. I know we made this decision not to do it because there wasn't going to be anything. If there was something major, then we would have this discussion, this meeting with them. And at the time, whenever we submitted our what we wanted to give to each other.
Did you happen to reach out to Harold Monroe after our meeting?
I was never given his contact information or how to contact Harold Monroe. I've met Harold now probably 7 times ever, and so I was not given any information to contact him.
You do recall the conversation that we had related
I remember the conversation, but I do remember, I will say this, I do not remember Harold's name. I remember Frank Stevenson's name being brought up as him being the chairman of the council and him having that meeting with them. But I was not.
Do you have questions you would like to ask him now?
Well, this is
we got a motion.
They've already said that no matter what was funded, that they would not be interested in it. So my question was whether or not, had the city on May 1st voted to approve it, would it have been the stance of PAX to cut it after we had approved to fund it?
Well, let me give you a little bit of understanding about PAX transportation. Our primary contract that trumps everything else is the Medicaid non-emergency medical transportation. We are bound by contract that trumps everything else, even if we have to stop doing any kind of other public transportation. That is from the that trumps it. With the lack of being able to get vehicles, and we've addressed some of that. We've got the permission from the state to get by used vehicles, which typically you have to go through the state bid contracts. And what we've done since Blue Dot closed down, because of that, we have addressed that with regards to the state allowed us to get several used vehicles for us to replace the capacity that Blue Dot did Medicaid subcontracting for us. The equivalent of about 15 full-time drivers. I don't know what Blue Dot did outside of that as far as public transportation. I have no idea. I know that in the last 7 years, we have averaged close to $1 million a year that we paid Blue Dot for those services. I don't understand how you can go out of business or not sell your business with that kind of funding. But those are the decisions or the conversations that we've had the last couple of years or so, because we look at this, because here at PAX, we're a nonprofit. We have to look at where do we get the biggest value, help the most people with the funding that we get. Again, we lost $1.8 million in 2018 that was used largely to start the seed money for programs like this. The toll money went away. There's no money now that will purchase a new vehicle without the city coming up with 20% of the purchase price. And it's just a matter of, again, based on the ridership numbers. This is not something that any public transportation company would look at in starting, because the numbers just do not work, unfortunately.
A question I have, sort of going along with what Adam says, is why was the request put in if you all were not going to fund it for the fiscal year 2023?
We put the request in with if you're going to do this, the request is going to be significantly higher than what it's been in the past. And that brought about some conversations on, and that's where we brought up again the fact that the ridership numbers are just not there.
Do we know what that amount would have been or is?
It would have been about $320,000, $340,000 total, which we split half with the city.
Request was for 118.
But again, we've already had our budgets approved, submitted that to the funding sources, and made decisions based upon us not continuing that service.
If you all remember the May 1st meeting, that was the reason for the roll call vote on May 1st, was because they have a process that they had to go through in order to stop the service on July 1st.
We had a public meeting. I think 3 people attended. It was advertised. If you ride the city transit, you need to be at this meeting. And again, we had 3 people that came and expressed some concerns and all. From where we sit with regards to the state transportation cabinet, we have more than met our public notification requirements.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional questions?
And Mayor, just as a point of reference, we've had a first reading of the proposed budget, and we had a second reading tonight, and Councilmember Kavanaugh's motion to amend would be considered a first reading, and we'd have to start that process all over again. So I guess we can vote as to whether or not her proposal to amend the budget would be approved, and if not, you could go ahead and vote on the budget you have before you. Otherwise, we'll have to have a first reading and a second reading.
Would that be considered a significant change?
Yeah, because it reallocates all the numbers.
So we have a motion and a second with an amendment to the budget. Let's do a roll call vote, and depending on where that goes, we'll.
Misty Cavanaugh.
Yes.
Tony Space.
No.
Adam Townsend.
Yes.
Larry Knopfinger.
No.
Frank Stevenson.
No.
Chad Mincer.
Yes.
So motion does fail.
It wouldn't question. It still would make it. I agree with Misty on a lot of things, but this company is a big company. They don't want to. It don't make any difference how much money it sounds like you throw at them. And I've listened to all these, and I'm with them 100%. But even if we redo the budget, they're not wanting to come back. Any company is. It doesn't look like to me.
We don't have the wherewithal to do it on our own. That's the point.
You know, we can't afford the buses. So that's just thought from me. We need to come up with some solution, I agree. But if this company's this big and they're scared of it, the city sure doesn't want any of it.
So the motion for the annual budget with amendments has failed. I'll go back to the
original motion.
The second reading of the original ordinance adopting the annual budget for fiscal year July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. Do we have a motion for the original?
Move the original presentation of the budget, the first reading.
The second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Kim, can we have a roll call?
Misty Cavanaugh.
Yes.
Tony Space.
Yes.
Adam Townsend.
Well, this is not the budget that I hope to pass tonight. I vote yes.
Larry Knopfinger.
Yes.
Frank Stevenson.
Yes.
And Chad Mincer.
We'll vote yes. I understand that I'm kind of a flip vote on this last one here, and I do hope that people like Michael Howard, who has put a lot of time and effort, and Tony Smith both, put a time and effort that we do need to find a solution to fill these gaps. And when I say gaps, I guess I mean holes now, because with Blue Dot leaving and with this no longer being offered, I hope to maybe find some additional solutions so that we can help these individuals. So I would like to see an allocation come eventually of a solution to this problem.
All right, motion passes. Next, we have new business. We have the first reading of an ordinance amending the annual budget for the fiscal year July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023.
Be it ordained by the City of Madisonville, Kentucky as follows. Section 1, that the annual budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022, ending June 30th, 2023 is hereby amended as follows. See the Exhibit A attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. And this is first reading on this at a regular meeting, and second reading will be June the 20th, 2023.
We're going to ask Miss Diana Phillips, who is our finance supervisor, to please come forward.
Evening, Mayor and Council. The amended budget summary in numbers is in front of you, and I'm going to read the changes that were made. The general fund revenue increased $4,321,500, which includes $600,000 in police grants, $619,000 in fire grants, and $3,696,000. What'd you say?
6,000 for the police grants.
Sorry, 6,000 for police grants, 619,000 in fire grants, and $3,696,500 in airport grants. General fund transfers and other sources decreased by $300,000, which includes a decrease of $400,000 from the sanitation fund and an increase in $100,000 from coal severance. Police expenses increased by $60,000, which includes the $6,000 in grant expenses, $54,000 in building repairs and other expenses. Fire expenses increased in the $619,000 in grant expenses. Transportation expenses decreased by $589,000 in capital projects. The airport expenses increased by $3,696,500 in grant expenses. The park expenses increased by $225,000, $50,000 in Mar Park repairs, agricultural expenses, and construction, $175,000 in park maintenance, repairs, and additional capital items. Cemetery expenses increased by $10,000 in maintenance, repairs, fuel, and other supplies. Coal severance fund revenues increased by $127,500, which includes $119,000 in coal severance tax, $3,500 in mineral severance tax, and $5,000 in interest income. The coal severance fund transfers to other funds increased by $107,180, which includes $7,180 to the Municipal Aid Fund and $100,000 to the General Fund. Municipal Aid Fund revenues increased by $86,500, which includes $81,500 in road aid discretionary funds received and $5,000 in interest income. Municipal aid fund transfers and other sources increased by $7,180 from coal severance. Restaurant tax increased by $1,183,000, which includes $660,000 received from the Hopkins County Fiscal Court in contributions for the sports complex, and $523,000 in additional restaurant tax and other miscellaneous revenues. Restaurant tax transfers from the prior year increased by $4,412,000. This includes a prior year loan proceeds and operating transfers to the sports complex fund. Restaurant tax transfers to other funds increased by $3,912,000. This includes the full transfer of the $442,000 from the reserve, less $500,000 that was in the original budget. Restaurant tax events and capital projects increased by $1,683,000, which includes additional sports complex expenses and additions to budgeted event expenses. The sports complex revenue in the amount of $8,588,000 was reallocated to revenues to balance transfers between the sports complex and the restaurant tax. Pension revenues in the amount of $350,400 were reallocated to revenues to balance the transfers between the pension fund and the general fund. Sanitation fund revenues increased by $140,000 in sanitation fees. Sanitation fund expenses increased by $625,000 due to increases in equipment parts, fuel, construction boxes, and other capital items. And the sanitation fund transfer to the general fund was reduced by $400,000.
All right, with that being said, we do have one final order of business.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. It's a first reading. Next meeting. I thought that too. I was confused.